I think we'll go ahead and start it. Does everybody have R and RStudio on their laptop?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So my name is Peter Crank. I'm going to help. Yes, I'm going to help kind of facilitate this workshop. I also have with me Heather, Michelle, and Mary, and then we'll have another one, Lindsay, who's coming in a little bit, who will be kind of helping just facilitate if you guys have any issues or questions. They can run over and check out what you guys are working on at that, on your computer. Did you guys all get the files that I sent on Tuesday? Okay, great. So if you have those on your laptop with you, that's fantastic. And we'll go ahead and get rolling. So basically, this is a workshop put on by Geyser in combination with CAP and with the Urban Climate Research Center, just to kind of help us all get comfortable with R. If we haven't used it before, or if we're familiar with other types of statistical software packages, this is a great way to just get more familiar with it and see how you can use the open source aspect of R to your advantage. So R is not a pirate code, even though it kind of feels like it when you just talk about R all the time. But it is open source, so it's free to use, and that means you can also change it to whatever you need to do with it. It also is constantly being updated with improved documentation on how different functions within R are to be used and handled, which is great when you look at the new grant programs that are requiring data management plans. It means that when you use R, everything is, you can reproduce it, and you can go down to exactly the types of functions that you're using and what the limitations are within those, because you're using an open source format. So what does it do? So it covers anything from numerical and quantitative analysis. So both the qualitative and the quantitative are capable within it, as well as data management, version controlling, data visualization, as well as even spatial analysis. So you can use this in replacement for SPSS, SAS, MATLAB, GIS. It can do all of those things. It just requires you to know a little bit more about the coding and the underlying structures to be able to do these types of things in R, as opposed to more of a point-and-click type of program. So the stuff that we're going to cover, we're going to kind of take it in two chunks: computer programming, as well as the statistics and data analysis. So we'll cover working in directories, as well as what R projects are, and what the advantages for those. As well as scripting in R, the different types of files that you can use to script and decode and run in R. And then the packages that you can use. We'll also cover the basics of how to import a data set, how to clean and transform that data so you can actually use it, as well as some data manipulation, which is also how to extract stuff from a table. If you just walked in, feel free to sign in. We haven't really started much in the way of actual R yet. But if you have R and RStudio on your laptop, open up RStudio, and then we will get started shortly. So with computer programming, these are things, again, we're going to cover in that. Working directories. How many of you guys have used R before and know what I'm talking about when I say working directory? Okay, so about half-ish of you guys. Cool. So working directories are basically where R is looking to find your scripts, find your data, and where it will store that stuff unless you redirect it. So your default working directories will all be different. So if you're in RStudio, go down to the bottom left where the console is. Let me flip over really quickly and show you guys that. So this down here is your console. So to find out where you are in your computer, click on the console and type get WD, and then hit open parentheses, and then because it's RStudio, it'll automatically close it for you, which is nice, so that unless you delete that one, it closes all of your parentheses and makes sure everything runs. So if you just hit enter or return, this tells you where you are at this point in your computer. So for me, I'm on the C drive under users, my ASU ID, and then I'm on my Google Drive at this point. So make sure you know where you are at this point, because when we get started into pulling in the data, you'll need to direct it to where the data has been downloaded already.
Did everyone get that?
Wait.
You can find your console and you got it.
We good there?
Yeah.
So, you can reset your working directory by saying set WD instead of get WD, but just be aware that that will restructure where R is looking in general at that point. So we need to be very careful with that. The advantage to using an R project comes in here, because if you use R projects, you are able to, whenever you open this new project, or open the project again, it automatically resets your working directory to wherever you defined it then. So if you're working on your thesis or your dissertation, you have all this data, and you pull it in initially, create an R project then that says this is where you need to look to find this data, so that as you go forward, you can just open up the R project, and it's automatically pointing it to the right directory, so you're not constantly having to remember where you put it and where you have to get to it. So let's make an R project in our studio. So to do so, you're going to go up to this top right corner where mine says Google Drive. You're going to click on that. If you haven't done this before, it should say none. But you can go in and you can make a new project. And so then it'll give you some options. You can do a new directory, you can do an existing directory, you can also do the version control through this. So let's all make a new directory at this point, since we're not pulling in, we don't already have the data in place. So let's just say this is the R workshop. And you can redirect it however you want. I'm going to back it out just a little bit and go where I've stored everything. So we're going to put it, I'm going to put it in here. So once you've picked your spot, you hit open, so that now you can see right here, this is the full directory path to where you're going. So this is the directory name, and that's what it'll call it'll have like a .rproj at the end of it. And then this is where it's actually going to be stored. So when you open the R project, it'll automatically direct the directory to go right there. Does that make sense? Has everybody got that? Cool.
So it's create project?
Yeah, go ahead and just create the project.
It's like existing. Okay.
So it'll probably reboot basically. And now if you type in get WD, open and close parentheses, note that my working directory is now changed to that location. Does that make sense? Handy? I think it's handy. Because then I know, okay, every single time I open this, I'm not having to type into my scripts, set the working directory to this. Just use the R project and it'll do that for you. Okay. Let's flip back to my...
Yeah, I think it was done.
Okay. Any questions so far from you guys on this? We all generally comfortable here?
Desktop as a working directory.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go back just a few steps?
Yes.
I misread.
No, it's okay. I want to see it again.
Okay, so in computer programming,
Thank you, Ed.
working directories basically telling it where you want to pull the data from.
Yeah.
And you can use an R project to do that.
Yeah.
So in our studio, our projects are up in the top right. You just go up there and you click a new directory. You create a name for it, and then you would tell it where you want that directory to be located.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move forward on this next. There we go. So now that we have a working directory, we know where we're pointing our program to find stuff. We now need to create the documents where we're going to write our code and script. So you can simply just type into the console and do stuff there, but it doesn't store that information so that you can rerun it multiple times like a week later if you realize you messed something up. Using scripts, using our markdown, using a variety of other different options. If you go into RStudio and to the upper left, there's a variety of options there as to what we're capable of doing. So right here, you can do in our script, you can do in our notebook, our markdown, you can make web apps with RStudio, etc. We're just going to focus on the R scripts today because that's the simplest. That's what, just using R, that's how you would do it as well. So if you just create one of those by adding one and creating a new one there, it'll open up a blank one there. So the key difference when you get into R Markdown, so R script is the basic standard one. It means you can reproduce a script and others can do it as well. With R Markdown, you can actually begin to write text, paragraphs, and create a manuscript all within R, which is super handy. It is a lot more advanced to do this, but I just want to make you aware that there are ways of actually using R to not only analyze your data, but then also to document how you did it and then reproduce that in a PDF or regular Word document. Come on in. There should be a sign-in sheet somewhere. So yeah, R Markdown is fantastic, but it is a little bit more advanced. I just wanted to let you guys know what that is, and I'll kind of show you at the end what one would look like with this, the code that we'll create. So this is what an R script generally looks like. Yours may be a white background with black text. Since I work in R a fair amount, I switched to something that doesn't bother my eyes quite as much. But that's what an R script would look like. And then an R Markdown looks a little bit different. So you can see at the top that it has a title, it gives you an author, the date, what type of output it is. You can make this a Word document, PDF, HTML. And then you can break it up so that you can use R in here, and then you can write notes to yourself here, create headers, those types of things. With R Markdown as well, you can make notes to yourself about the type of program you're using. So this is your command line in the computer itself if you're using a PC. And so from this, I'll show you guys this as well, but you can actually download data from online within RStudio itself using FTP access to things. Which again is super handy because then you don't have to go online, point and click, download and go, okay, where did I put this? How do I bring it into R? You can do it all from within R itself. So looking at the types of packages and what packages are, basically they are families of functions that other people have already created that can perform different actions or functions. So you can also write them yourself. That's not, because it's open source, it's what everyone does. But I find it handy to use what other people have done because there are people who are much better at computer coding, much better at statistics than I am. And so I can use what they have done to then apply it to my research and my data. And because this is open source, you can go in and see exactly what they did and how they did this so that when you use it, you have a justification for why you use this specific function. So these are just a few that we'll be using today. So tidyr is a part of tidyverse, which is a very large grammatical design structure. Basically keeps things tidy, keeps your data tidy. Diplyr is another part of that as well, and we'll use both of those. Abind is a multi-dimensional table binding package. So there's a common function is rbind or cbind, which means you combine data based creating columns from them or creating rows. Abind does it across an array, so it's a three-dimensional matrix that it's creating. And then data table is a common table formatting package. So to do this, to actually create or to load in these things, a lot of you guys may not have these in there, so you'll go over here to packages, and then you'll go to install, and you would just type in, say, tidyr. Handy dandy, it pops up for you, and then you just hit install. And it goes online to whatever crane you have installed your RStudio under, and gets that for you. Now that means that it's within RStudio, but it isn't actually loaded into your script yet, so it can't actually call the functions just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through and pull in tidyr. So you would type in library, open parentheses, tidyr, close parentheses. And then to have this run, since you're in the script, you can either highlight it and then go up and hit run, or you can just hit Control Enter and it will automatically run it for you. So then you can see on here in the console that it actually has loaded that in, and then frequently you'll get a warning message that just simply tells you when it was last updated relative to the whole RStudio program, or the R program itself. So then once you have the caret come back, it means you're good. So let's go through and we'll go ahead and install the rest of these. So you go over and you would install packages, and then you would, in the search bar, type in Diplier, and then install that one. A-bind, install that one, and data table, install that one. You guys following so far? Once we get all those installed, we'll then load them into our library to use.
So we're installing the Phoenix data and the...
We're going to install first these packages. So, yeah, so in the...
Just go through installing packages.
Yep. So we're going to, in this part on the bottom right of your RStudio, you go to Packages, Install, and then Diplier is another one that we're going to install. So then once you have that, you enter, and then you install.
So you're not installing data, you're installing things to help you clean up this.
Correct.
So we're not dealing with any data yet.
Yeah. Oh. Oh, like the code of it?
No, like, I mean, you could select, like, install that packages.
Yeah.
But
So,
I mean,
on this side, install,
Yeah.
packages, install.
Oh.
Oh, right.
Yeah, here.
And then you type it in.
And then I typed in here on the slide, so I typed the first, but the rest, I don't remember them. Here.
Okay.
Why?
R.
So this is another way of
You should
doing
find- yeah.
install.
I don't remember what it does, but then you ask to install.
Yeah, go back to the
packages.
Oh, yes.
Packages are installed.
Yep.
And then
So DPL, YR, A-bind, data.table.
Alright, so now I got a question.
Okay.
After you do tidyr first, it has the loading text that shows all the packages that get loaded in with, and then afterwards, on mine, it shows a new text. When I do diplier or abar, and I did it.
And then a bind.
You guys anybody having issues at this point?
Yes, all of these.
Okay. Because I just been. Yeah, so if you already have some of these, yeah, so if it's in here.
And then that one from Mexico.
Yes, so yeah, if you check it, it loads up the data library. I just
Where are you
prefer
from?
once it's installed, use the library, just so I know that this is what I do.
Maybe in the GPSA.
But yeah, there's like 6 different ways of doing it in our studio. And so it's just like which one to use.
I'm done, but I'm not sure if I did it well.
Well, I did tidyr first. I heard you.
Yeah, this is
I gotta wait for it. So I think I like
Yeah,
Okay.
I think something is
Or I can. Okay, thank you.
So there you go.
Yeah, when you see that sign sitting there for a while, like sheets get called.
There you go.
Okay, you know tonight we go blind.
All right, we all getting there? Making our way through that? Okay. So there are a couple different ways to load this into your script. You can either go over here to your list of packages and check that, and it will do it for you. I prefer to do it in the command line just so that in any code I know what packages I'm using, so that in the future I go, okay, this is what this function came from because I was using it in this. So you can just type in library, open parentheses. Let's see, we did tidyr, dplyr, there we go. It's also handy that as you type, RStudio will auto suggest the different packages, the different functions. So then if you can't remember how exactly the function or the package is spelled, you can just start typing and it'll help you out in that. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of these that we're going to use. We're going to use abind, we're going to use data table. And is that all that I have? Okay. So once you have all those in there, you can then highlight all of them and control return, and it will automatically load all of those consecutively. So you're basically running all the different sets of code at the same time, or in order, without having to type it in every single time. So it just speeds things up if you want to type a whole bunch of stuff out and then run it to see if it works.
But what should happen when I highlight them?
If you highlight them and then do control return, it'll run all those lines of code together.
Return, or you can hit run there. It'll run the code, and now R will be able to use any of the functions in those.
Does everybody have these libraries now
Yes, thank you.
running in their scripts? Yep. Cool. All right.
Highlight them all and then go what?
Control return or command return on the Mac.
Control run and enter.
Yes. Yeah.
What did you say on the map?
Command return. So the the weird symbol. I don't know how to describe that symbol.
You're gonna share the PowerPoint after?
Yes.
Well, okay, so I'm writing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. I will
I'll
post
highlight all of them.
Thank you.
these so you guys can all see.
Yeah, do the other one, the data table one too.
Okay. So we are working on or have all of these installed. Yes?
Like that.
Yeah, and then you can highlight all of them and shift enter. We'll run them all, or you can do it line by line. So yeah, there's an undo button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once you have that installed, we can go ahead and start importing the actual data that we are going to use. So this is, when I was creating this is what I had it listed under when I downloaded it. So you will need to adjust this phrasing to wherever it's stored on your computer. And you could change this name that you're going to call this table. But it'd just be easier to use this so as to flow through what I'm using. But basically what we're doing here is we're saying we're going to give it a name, and then we're going to say that this name gets a CSV file. So read.csv is a function that helps you import CSV files and tables into R. And so the function, when you open the parentheses, you need to give it a file name and where to look for that. And then you also want to tell it whether or not it has headers. You could leave the header part off, but it may or may not register that there are headers in your table. And in this set of data, we do have headers. So you do header equals true, and then close your parentheses. So let me flip over to RStudio, and we will.
What is this? This looks like it's a markdown file, which is why it's not running. Yeah.
Okay.
This is an R script file.
Oh, and then you crash.
And if we go highlight them all, it's still not working.
So it has to be the flu.
Yeah, so you are in a markdown file, and I think you have different keyboard shortcuts, but you also have a run button right here, and you can also press that. Error. There's no package. So you did
I didn't.
install. Let's install the packages though.
did. I put all
But I
together.
think because you installed them in here, and this is like a markdown file, you need to reinstall them in here. So, Thai, whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I think you were working in a
Yep.
markdown
Can
file.
you change the letter
You
into
can
white?
see the difference.
Oh, yeah, hold on.
I
So, let me remember how I actually. Go to global options. Appearance. Yeah, I was checking what I have right now, so I can go back to it. Oh, yeah. We'll see if it's just passing up here. Part of it, not all of it. Me. There we go. Okay. Does that help you guys see it better? Okay.
Yeah, that looks
Cool.
better for.
So I changed this just because when I'm working in R for hours and hours of time, the other one hurts less on the eyes. So yeah. So I'm directing it so I can pull this data in to the right spot. So, historical climate. Read.csv.
You should explain how to browse for the folder.
sorry.
Yes.
I'm trying to install all these. Yeah.
Do you have just like plain R?
It's just
So we open the Phoenix or the daily max? Which Phoenix? The first?
1976 to 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. And then it should be able to talk to the cloud. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so some best practices in terms of storage. I tend to use Google Drive since ASU gives us unlimited storage on Google Drive. So I find that fantastic because I often switch between my lab computer and my laptop. So I tend to store stuff on Google Drive to access for R. So if that's your most common place that you store things, then there. If you are always using the same computer and you're never switching between computers, then probably your best option is to store it locally and then back things up from the computer itself, not through R. So when you set your projects, wherever you tend to use that data and pull it from, set your R project to be from that same area as well. That way you're not having to switch back and forth a whole lot. So yeah, historical climate Phoenix data, I can put the header on. Header equals,
So make sure your data is saved under your project.
yes.
Yeah. And the R_workshop folder you made that has your R project in it, that's where you want to make sure the data is saved. Because it's going to look there to find your data. Because that's where your working directory is.
If it doesn't find it, do you know why? It says like error. Is it that?
Depends on the error. Frequently it's because it's looking and it can't find it wherever you directed it to.
Yeah.
And you just need to change where you've put that data or change where you're searching for it.
Or you also mistype something.
Or you mistype. That's also frequently a problem that I have.
Why do you
Okay.
have
Just like how you name it.
Yes. So you're naming, when you're reading in this file, you need to give it a name in R. And so I'm just calling it historical climate Phoenix because we're looking at 31 years of data with this.
Otherwise you can just do it.
Right, without naming it, but then you don't know what to use to call it back. So you could call it X if you wanted, but I tend to use much more descriptive naming tools so that I know when I'm using it what I'm doing. So you can't use spaces in R in most coding. So I use the underscore here and here to distinguish between different words. You can use periods. You avoid using dashes because that's also subtraction in R. So you don't want to use that. But you can use dots or underscores, as well as mixing up uppercase and lowercase. Left caret dash, which is basically how it stores, and then your function read.csv, the file you're telling it to find, comma, so the next argument in the function header equals true.
What does that mean?
So that means you're telling it to look for the headers in the CSV file. If you don't tell it that, it may just read that as the first row in the table. So that's, if you do that, it's okay. There are ways of fixing it. Sometimes it does figure it out on its own, but I tend to just write that initially if I know that it has headers, because I don't want it to initialize things wrong and then have to go in and edit things.
And there's a comma between the file name and header, if you can't see it.
Yes. Yeah, right here. And that separates different parts of the arguments within the function. It is by comma. All right, so do we have it reading in the CSV file? It'll probably take it a minute because there's a fair amount of data in it. And you'll know that it's running if you run this and the caret doesn't immediately pop back up, but it's just left blank here for a little bit. That means it's reading in the data. It's trying to run the function that you're calling it to do.
Anybody who doesn't have the data read in yet?
I don't have.
Copy.
So I have the files here stored in my Google Drive, right? Here they are. There's, I don't know, some. So I copy the link directly.
Yeah, I can do that.
So what I did, I copied.
So it's trying to look for this folder right here. It's trying to look here. So what you can do is you can just, wherever you stored it, download it before,
This is the directory
just
already.
Yeah.
Like
So
outside
for
of
the first, for
Well,
the,
it's saying,
for the Phoenix.
yeah, I don't think you have your, go back.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, just pull those two and put it into that.
Type in,
Yep.
type in,
That's the easiest way to do it.
WE, where's your?
Usually if something changes the color.
No, I need you to scroll down to like, or push enter. Just push enter. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you hit enter, it'll just like jump into the console.
A single there. And so it's all green.
Because otherwise I just, for the read that system.
Yeah, that can also work.
Oh, really? So now it's taken that? And is this all that, is there anything else?
I think right now we're just doing this. And then
And you just wait?
okay, so you gotta set your working.
Is this the drive you need to be in?
For this.
Yeah.
So since up here it doesn't set and then a file path.
So you should be able to just write, if this is the drive where the data is stored.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So here's where working they can like here's the file with
So you wanna do it like before you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You don't have to click on it. It's go back to R. So you should be able to type just exactly what he has. Let me delete this. So type exactly what he has up there. Historical.
One handy way to know that you've got it to work is that when it has run the function and it's created the file and the object within R, it'll pop up in your global environment up here. So mine's still running right now, and that's why it's not up there.
And
But
then space. You don't have to use space, but it's good practice, so it makes it readable.
Yeah, at the
Yeah, that arrow thing.
you gotta put like, I think it's
medium
but it depends on your computer, but maybe a C.
And then read.csv.
Macs
Yeah,
are
and see
usually
it,
tilde.
it starts to pop up, so you can just select that, yeah. And then quotation mark. Phoenix. Yeah, the name of it should be
I just put
exactly
in
what
like
the
a
name of the
tilde.
file is.
the file is the same as I
Yeah.
downloaded.
So
Yeah, so you
right
should be
here
able
you
to
can see
just copy the
tilde
file.
desktop training.
Yeah, perfect.
That's where he is right now.
So you get rid of the users too then.
Yeah, get rid
Yeah,
of your
you're basically here. All that goes into the tilde.
and then write .csv. Yeah, perfect. And then
So once it finishes, it pops up here, so you know. Oh, okay, it's actually working.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
And then parentheses.
Yeah, but go back inside the parentheses and write a comma, and then header equals true. And the true is all caps like he has it up there.
We want it to match.
After the comma.
After the comma.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't need it, but it makes
Okay.
it more readable. But
We're gonna get rid of this.
Well, space.
So that's what's telling it to look for a header in the data.
Command
Give it
R.
column names.
She's telling your computer like this is the function that I'm working on.
Where is
This
run?
one here.
yeah, or run. Yeah, that works.
It's
And then see when the stop comes up, that means it's still
so it
reading.
already knows that you're in this
So
folder, so we can get rid of
I don't think so. That looks right.
it should come up.
Oh, in just a second, I'll show you how to view the data.
How it should look when it's like done.
You'll be able to see this. It will look like this.
Is there anybody who
The regular
isn't getting help that hasn't gotten this to work yet?
Looks like it matches. Okay, so let's try and run that.
There you go.
First one.
Thank you. How are you working?
So you want to make put
Yeah, I have a file for that. But I should have done what you did. I didn't do that. I put it in my Google Drive. Because I said I think it's running now. Because it stopped.
Yes,
But
so yours
ours
is
here.
good.
Yeah?
Yeah, yours is fine, and it read it without it in there.
Okay, yeah. I had to.
Okay, anybody again who doesn't